So there have been these articles floating around regarding Pixar's future plans for movie releases. The general message of these articles is that Pixar wants to focus more on sequels or reboots going forward while still maintaining a consistent stream of original projects. This is disappointing to hear, but not at all surprising. Hollywood has become increasingly dependent on reboots and sequels based off beloved legacy franchises, and until there's some kind of major shakeup to the industry, that doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. Pixar was the antithesis to this for a bit there, consistently releasing original projects throughout the 2020s, but it seems they have succumbed to the sequel trend in order to remain financially stable. But of course, this isn't the first time this happened. Pixar in the 2010s was almost completely dominated by sequel releases. Despite that, I've always viewed the original projects that were released in this time frame to be some of Pixar's greatest achievements, thus informing the break from sequels they took in the 2020s. But alas, here we are back at the sequel well. While I am ultimately against this kind of decision, the whole thing has gotten me thinking about the past Pixar sequels a lot more and how good a lot of them are. Yeah, kind of a weird stance to take given the recent news, but I'm sticking to it. I feel like these are usually written off as boring or bland or even blatantly bad, but I think that's wildly unfair. Do they reach the heights of the originals? Well, one or two do, but most of them don't. Does that make them bad movies that aren't worth watching? Absolutely not. I've been consistently surprised and delighted by the level of thought and care that has gone into every one of these sequels, and I thought it would be worth it to look back on them and just kind of chat about their merits. This is probably going to be a bit of a rambly video. I don't really have a strict thesis in mind or anything, but it'll be fine. Just ride the wave with me. Also, subscribe. I never say that at the start of videos, but I think it's supposed to help. We got a little channel here, gotta help it out any way I can. Here's that chart that YouTubers like to show to guilt trip you. Alright, let's get started. First up are the Toy Stories. Bit of a weird one to start with since these are easily the most beloved. Toy Story 2 especially feels like a massive outlier in the Pixar sequel discussion, probably because it came out so much earlier than any of the other ones. Toy Story 3 is also pretty well regarded, at least it definitely was when it first came out. Over the years, I've definitely seen more backlash towards it, but it's also my personal favorite of the Toy Story quadrilogy, and my second favorite movie of all time, so I will comfortably consider it to be a timeless classic alongside its two predecessors. Toy Story 4 is obviously the most controversial of the bunch, and definitely my least favorite, but not for a lack of trying. The opening sequence where the gang saves RC and Bo Peep gets taken away still hits me hard. I put it alongside any scene from the first three movies as quintessential Pixar emotional damage. The rest of the movie certainly makes some interesting choices regarding Woody's character arc and how we should view toys in this universe, and while I'm not a huge fan of where those decisions ultimately led, I greatly respect the risky developments they were willing to make. And while yes, Toy Story 3 was a perfect ending that did not need to be followed up on, it's clear that there's a soul and a sense of purpose to Toy Story 4, a real effort to further explore these characters and this world in a compelling and impactful way. This wasn't some half-assed cash grab, it was a full-ass cash grab, and I respect it. That doesn't mean I don't have my nitpicks with all of these movies. I've always found Toy Story 2 and 4 to be weirdly grimy and colorless compared to 1 or 3. I guess when your primary locations are an apartment, airport, and antique shop, that's just gonna happen, but the vibrancy of 1 and 3's locales make them much more pleasant movies to watch. They also just don't know what to do with poor Buzz Lightyear. With every new Toy Story, he seems to just become less and less of a real character. In saying that both 2 and 3 go back to having him be delusional, though perhaps it was all worth it for Spanish Buzz, 4 is even more pathetic with this inner voice bit. In general, 4's sidelining of most of the cast of the previous movies isn't great. I think the little group of Andy's toys is a big part of the appeal of these movies that's just gone from this entry, but I understand them not being relevant to this particular story they were telling. So, yeah, the Toy Stories are good. This is probably the least interesting part of the whole discussion because we all know this already. So let's move on to... oh, I forgot about Lightyear. It's sort of up for debate whether or not this should even count. It's basically a completely original thing with superficial ties to the Toy Story brand, but for what it's worth, I think this movie gets way too much hate. I view it as a fun little sci-fi flick with some interesting, if not a little overplayed ideas. At worst, it's completely harmless, and I don't understand the vitriolic meh that seemed to follow this movie everywhere. It's a good time, that's all I really have to say about it. Let's move on. Okay, so Cars. See, this is why titling a video of Pixar sequels are pretty great actually is a problem. The Cars franchise exists. This is possibly the only time Pixar has blatantly and unforgivably developed movies with the sole purpose of selling toys. I'm including the first Cars in that. It does not get away with existing just because it's part of the 2000s Pixar set. These movies are annoying and dumb, and I don't like them. With that said, there's a part of me that kinda gets what they were doing with Cars 2. Like, A common facet of spy movies is the spy car, so filling up your car's characters with spy gadgets and making a spy movie is kinda fun. I don't hate this opening sequence with Finn McMissile, it's just the choice to center the whole movie on Mater that's grating as all hell. I've already given this tow truck way too much of my time on this channel, so let's just move on to Cars 3. This movie is kinda just nothing to me. I lost any investment in Cars a long time ago, but I can recognize that they were clearly trying to send the trilogy off as graciously as they could. Refocusing back on Lightning and exploring the ending phase of his racing career, that's a natural progression from the first Cars movie that makes sense. Do I like the movie? No, but I could respect them making an effort to treat Cars with some dignity even if it doesn't deserve it. In any case, throughout this video, I'm going to be making some positive sweeping statements about Pixar sequels. Please note that every one of these statements has a big old asterisk that says, except Cars. Now that the two obvious franchises that I don't have much to say about are out of the way, the video can actually start. Monsters University is such a bizarre little movie. Kinda like Cars 2, they make a choice to center this movie more on one of the side characters, this time being Mike Wazowski. Where in Cars this was an obnoxious choice, here it's surprisingly effective. It's also just generally much more natural here. While Monsters Inc. is certainly about Sully first and foremost, Mike is absolutely treated as a co-protagonist and major linchpin of the story. Monsters University kinda just swaps Mike and Sully's roles for this prequel, which works great. In a way, it positions Sully as being an important figure in Mike's main story in the same way Mike was for Sully in the first film. And it's a great story. On the surface, the college antics are kinda goofy, and I remember as a kid not really understanding any of it, but now that I've gone through college, I find the whole thing quite a bit more charming. And it's all funny. I feel like Pixar's comedy is a less talked about aspect of their movies that's often pretty stellar, and the Monsters duology is a great example of this. It's a weird, goofy concept and world, so they play into that, and it's great. I feel like people don't tend to care about or like the whole Uzma Kappa crew, but I enjoy them quite a bit. Again, I think after having gone through college, seeing all these caricatures of different college students is a lot more charming to me. Conceptually, the idea of a Monsters Inc. prequel covering Mike and Sully becoming friends is just a really strong idea that could have very easily fallen into some prequel traps like over-explaining things that just don't need to be explained. But this movie doesn't really do that, except for like these two moments with Randall. It just focuses on telling its surprisingly compelling story about these two college dorks becoming best friends for life. In general, the more I see this movie talked about, the more merit people give to Mike's character arc and the messaging of the whole thing. He's passionate about scaring, but he just doesn't really have the skills to be a scarer, so he has to learn to channel that passion through coaching. It's such a unique storyline that perfectly builds off what we know about the character from the first film. And having Sully, the naturally gifted slacker, to play off of is perfect. The whole final sequence at the summer camp might be my favorite scene across both movies. Well, okay, I think Sully scaring Boo kinda has to be number one, but it's incredibly close. This heart-wrenching confession, the completely justified "you don't know how I feel," the first emotional vulnerability we ever see from Sully, all informed by the decision Sully made to cheat in the final competition betraying Mike's trust, it's all just perfect. And them working together to pull off the final scaring of the adults, what an achievement. And I also love how they get expelled after this. I never thought a kids movie would, trivialize graduating college, I guess. But I mean, yeah, not finishing college is not the end of the world. You can still pursue your dreams and have the career you want without a degree. It's a really nice thing to see from a movie directed at an audience that is still making early decisions about their lives. So, yeah, great movie. Honestly, off the top of my head, I don't really have any major complaints with it. Other than, the antagonist trap being kind of annoying, but that's it. It's just a really good movie. Better than the original? No, but so what? The whole comparison and ranking exercise is sort of arbitrary anyway, a vehicle for discussion. Just because a sequel isn't better than the previous entry doesn't suddenly invalidate its existence. Maybe that's the thesis of this video. Finding Nemo is probably the movie I'm most surprised ever got a sequel. Like with Toy Story, there's some natural progression there, interesting ways to expand on the stories and themes. Cars obviously has the merch. The world of Monsters Inc. feels like it had some potential. The Incredibles is a superhero thing, so it's really easy to imagine a sequel for that. And Inside Out also has some pretty natural springboards for more stories. But Finding Nemo? I don't know, where do you really go from there? Do we want to see Nemo grow up or something? Personally, no, I don't. Is there more of the ocean to explore? I mean, I'm sure there probably is, but not in the way that feels compelling for a movie. Do we want Marlin to continue his emotional journey? Well, the thing with Marlin is that he's kind of really unlikable. The only reason we sympathize with him for this first movie is because we know what happened to his wife and kids, the tragedy that informs all his decisions surrounding Nemo. That's what makes Finding Nemo work. A sequel that's further removed from that, starring Marlin, would probably get annoying really fast. So they made Dory the protagonist. And not in the way they did with Mike, where Sully is still a major part of the story. No, the clownfish are totally sidelined here. Is the ocean getting boring? Well, fear not, this movie's set in an aquarium as we discover Dory's past. Yeah, I did not have a lot of faith in this one going in, and out of all the non-Cars sequels, it's probably my least favorite, but despite that, I think it's still a pretty great movie. It falls into the prequel over-explaining trap way harder than Monsters University does, but for every time they needlessly explain something, there's something else that kinda works. Oh, her parents taught her the Just Keep Swimming song. Yeah, could have gone my whole life without knowing that, but thanks, I guess. Oh, Dory can read because she grew up in an aquarium surrounded by human text. That makes sense and feels relatively natural. She can speak whale because she was friends with a whale. Riveting. But seriously, this concept that probably shouldn't work at all makes for an alright movie. Obviously, the big emotional reunion with Dory's parents is probably the biggest thing people remember from this movie. That and maybe the panic sequence where Dory has to navigate the pipes despite not being able to remember the directions. But I also appreciate the new aquarium characters as extension of Dory's arc. They're all in this Marine Life Institute to be rehabilitated, but Dory's out here living her best life with her short-term memory loss. And over the course of the movie, the aquarium gang all overcome their perceptions of their conditions. It's a simple idea, but works pretty well in my book. Again, when I'm given the pitch of a Finding Nemo sequel focusing on Dory, I expect nothing to come out of it. But I got some neat little thematic ideas, genuinely emotional sequences, and, whatever the hell this truck sequence is. Is this Pixar jumping the shark? Like, there wasn't anything nearly this absurd in the first movie, was there? Anyway, despite that being a pretty lukewarm defense, I think it goes to show that when developing these sequels, Pixar really does care about treating their characters with respect and trying to continue their stories in natural and interesting ways. As I said with Toy Story 4, something that comes off like it would be half-assed actually turns out to be pretty good. Not in any way matching the heights of the original, but that's okay, because this movie covers interesting new ground all on its own and there's merit in that. And that brings us to Incredibles 2. I feel like YouTube recommends a video essay about how bad this movie is once a week, despite the fact that I've never clicked on any of them. But it seems that after years of asking for it, the masses haven't taken kindly to the Incredibles sequel. I don't get it. I think this movie is pretty darn good. It always strikes me how both Incredibles movies are willing to have these more down-to-earth adult conversations that you don't really see in animated movies a lot. People like to cite this scene between Elastigirl and Evelyn on that particular point, but I'm more so talking about these moments near the start of the movie between Bob and Helen. As their lives are uprooted yet again, Bob talks about how he needs to find another job, and Helen's worried since he was miserable at his old insurance job. I also love this heated discussion about whether or not doing hero stuff is morally responsible and what lessons they want their kids to learn from the whole experience of the first movie. It's just interesting and engaging conversations that feel very unique to this property. And that whole idea of whether or not being a hero is a responsible thing to do is something that ties both movies together in a way. It's the big question that defines this world and directly influences the creation of both Syndrome and the Screenslaver. But you know something that Incredibles 2 might do even better than the first movie? The whole superhero family thing. Yeah, the first Incredibles really only gets the kids involved in the action really late into the runtime. The story focuses so much on Bob and his midlife crisis that we don't get enough chances to really engage with the rest of, well, the Incredibles. Incredibles 2 divides the focus much more cleanly between each character, and this delivers more on that idea of the superhero family. Not to mention how we see with Violet and Jack-Jack specifically how their superhero stuff is directly affecting their day-to-day lives and causing problems. That right there, how superpowers affect their family lives, that should be the main conceit of this premise, but it only really comes through in the sequel. How weird is that? I'm not saying Incredibles 2 is a better film than the first, far from it, but it certainly delivers in an area where the original was sorely lacking. This is also why it always confuses me when people say they wanted to see the kids grown up in a sequel or something. No, not yet. I'm good. Part of the fun here is the parents alongside their kids, all at different developmental stages. Again, the whole concept of the superhero family. Aging them all up is just gonna ruin that. There's still plenty to play with at the ages they're currently at. Also, kinda like the last couple sequels, this one focuses a bit more on a side character, Elastigirl. But it's not to that same degree as Cars 2, Monsters University, or Finding Dory. I'd rather say that this movie focuses more on the Incredibles as a group than the original, which focused more on Bob. Having Elastigirl out doing her own superhero missions is more an excuse for Bob to step up as a dad, as well as an interesting role reversal from the first movie. I do hear people complain about that. Oh, Helen, you were so mad at Bob for doing hero work, but now that you're doing it, it's fine? But that's removing all the context. Bob was doing it secretly by lying to his family. Helen's doing it with Bob's full support and knowledge after they had a lengthy discussion about it. The difference matters a lot. In general, it's great to see Bob and Helen's improved relationship in this movie. Sure, Bob is clearly jealous that Helen gets to do hero work and he doesn't, but he doesn't become bitter or resentful. He knows this is what's best for the future of his family and does what he can do at home to make this system work. It's honestly a really great place to see these characters after the events of the first movie. So, yeah, I don't know. The movie works really well for me. That's not even getting into the Jack sequences being great, the whole new cast of heroes that emerge in the wake of Elastigirl's escapades, the theme songs they made for the 3 older heroes that all slap so hard. It's just a really solid follow-up to the original. And that brings us to our most recent Pixar sequel, Inside Out 2. Spoilers, by the way. Little known fact, Inside Out is my favorite movie, ever. It just hit me at a very specific point in my life to do the maximum emotional damage, and I have never really recovered since. Joy crying over the core memories in the memory dump still gets me teary-eyed every time. So I was admittedly really worried about a sequel. My instinct is that they would completely ruin what made the first movie great and I would hate it forever. But, I hope you can tell by now, Pixar doesn't do that. It's clear that with every sequel they make, they take careful consideration when it comes to continuing the stories of these beloved characters. Inside Out was no different. It definitely didn't hit me as hard as the original, I don't think anything ever could, but I had a blast returning to this world. The music, the energy, the aesthetic, it all just made for perfect nostalgic comfort food. I love the introduction of new emotions for Riley's transition into puberty. I was worried when the trailer revealed anxiety, because I thought it would have been really easy to just paint her as a blatant villain, but that's not what they did. Sure, she's the antagonist, but villain is very much the wrong word. Through the lessons of the last movie, everyone recognizes anxiety as a meaningful member of the group with her own important role. Her taking complete control is what causes problems. In a way, anxiety needs to learn the lesson Joy learned in the last movie. One emotion can't govern Riley. And I think that's some cool synergy between these character journeys. Meanwhile, Joy and the group from the first film have to realize that they can't curate and decide who Riley is going to be. She is everything that she is, flaws and all, and they come to love her for that. That's a great little idea. Your emotions aren't who you are. I saw it coming from a mile away, pretty much as soon as they introduced the back of the mind, but it worked well all the same. In general, the new locations within the mind this go around are not as fun as the first films. I really like the belief system and the secrets vault. The new Imagination Land and Back of the Mind are important story beats, so they get a pass. But the stream of consciousness, the sarcasm, the brainstorm, yeah, not quite as memorable and fun as Dream Productions, Abstract Thought, The Subconscious, The Islands of Personality, etc. But it is nice that this time anger, fear, and disgust get to be on the adventure instead of being cooped up at headquarters. That's a really fun way to shake up the dynamics and get the most out of a sequel. And while the ending didn't hit me the same way the first movie did, I can easily recognize how someone who was my age back then might resonate with the final anxiety attack sequence. I'm not a particularly anxious person myself, but seeing friends react to this whole scene proved to me just how much power there was in it. I can think of no better way to follow up what the first Inside Out was for me. Is it better? Hell no. But that was never gonna happen. I'm just glad I get to be in this world for just a little longer. I think it's that experience with Inside Out 2 that has sort of informed my stances on the other Pixar sequels. Just enjoying being in a high-quality follow-up to some of my favorite stories. I realize that's a sentiment that every Hollywood executive probably wants me to have, but in Pixar's case, they're too consistently good for me to earnestly have a problem with them. That's the thing I really appreciate about Pixar, consistency. Pixar has a reputation of quality to uphold, and they do it despite what the internet might say. This doesn't just apply to their sequels. Several movies they've released in the 2020s seem to have gone through this cycle of internet hate despite being really great. Onward is even one of my top 10 Pixar movies. It's because Pixar is so good that I think people have a bigger reaction if they don't meet those insane expectations by even the slightest margin. I see a lot of comparison with DreamWorks, a company that seems to have the opposite effect. DreamWorks just churns out so much garbage, 48 total movies in 26 years, that everyone praises their holy name when something spectacular does come out of them. And yeah, I love Puss in Boots: The Last Wish too, but it doesn't suddenly make me forget about Shrek 3 and 4, The Boss Babies, Home, Ruby Gillman, The Bad Guys, the entire Trolls franchise, or Kung Fu Panda 4. God, have any of you seen Kung Fu Panda 4? It's such a dreadfully boring and soulless movie waving around these characters like action figures in order to capitalize on a series that should have died a decade ago. I compare something like that to Toy Story 4 and it's no contest, and Toy Story 4 is one of my lower ranked Pixar sequels. And that's not even getting into Illumination or Sony. I guess what I'm trying to say is, we're really lucky to have an animation studio like Pixar constantly striving for quality. They don't always hit the mark, but every single one of their films have so much heart and soul put into them. So let's return to those articles because yeah, it bothers me. I still don't like that Pixar is focusing more on sequels going forward. I do love their sequels, but their originals are a consistent breath of fresh air in this industry. The problem is, the past few originals all got shoved onto Disney Plus, so they didn't really make any money. It's difficult to express how frustrating Disney Plus is to me. Like, yes, I love having immediate access to any and all things Disney with the push of a button, but Disney's brand recognition is so strong that everyone and their mother can recognize their movies. A new release from them is gonna end up on Disney Plus in a few months, so why pay to see the thing in theaters? Pixar especially got shafted in this regard since Onward, Soul, Luca, and Turning Red were all dumped on the service for free. Onward did get a little time in theaters before total shutdown, but the writing was already on the wall by then. The point is, unless a movie of theirs blows up in popularity, or it's a sequel with easy brand recognition, they're not gonna make a lot of money. And this doesn't just apply to Pixar, all of Disney is affected by this. Disney Plus series are a huge factor in the Marvel and Star Wars burnout going around. Star Wars burnout might be more of a me thing. After Mandalorian Season 2, Clone Wars Season 7, and the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, I was heartily satisfied with my Star Wars consumption and just couldn't find myself interested in the 6 other shows they produced, especially when so many of them are giving out the same exact tone and style as The Mandalorian. Please, Star Wars, you're supposed to be fun, you do not have to be brooding and serious all the time. Anyway, I still believe both Marvel and Star Wars are consistently putting out the same quality of content they've always been. I'll save my Marvel takes for another day. But there's just so much of it thanks to the Disney Plus series that we're all sick of it. And don't even get me started on Walt Disney Animation Studios. That's an even bigger can of worms that really does not need to be opened right now. So I guess the thesis of this video is now to burn Disney Plus to the ground. Nah, I liked the thing about how sequels are still valid for existing even if they're not better than the original. Let's stick with that one. Well, that definitely got rambly at the end there. I guess I had a handful of loosely connected topics I wanted to vent about, and this became the vehicle for that. Thanks for watching, I think. Like, comment, subscribe. See you next time for something a little more coherent and thought out.